One of England's most beloved traditions is the annual boat race between Oxford and Cambridge. If you watch the race, you cannot help but notice that the seamless execution of each of the strokes that the rowers take will determine who wins the day. Now, is that relevant for firms? You might think that firms are much more complex and the execution side, well, while it might matter, is not really of that great importance. Norton and Kaplan, two professors, published an article in 1992 in the Harvard Business Review where they argued that the execution side determines at least, or is responsible at least for 60% of the failures of firm strategies. So in other words, this is clearly something that matters a great deal. They identified 4 factors that successful firms integrate in the development and, more importantly, in the execution of their strategy. So first, firms made sure that their strategy has clear targets, objectives in terms of finances. Secondly, they were asking what the strategy has to achieve for the customers. Third, they were looking at internal processes. And fourth, they looked at learning and growth. For each of these 4 aspects, they identified clear objectives and clear measurements in order to make sure that their strategy is executed accordingly. Now, in terms of the measurements, you can have some measurements which look backward. So, for example, a doctor might look at your temperature, might take your pulse in order to determine whether you're healthy at this moment. But now if this doctor wants to make sure that you'll be healthy in future, he might come up with a number of ways to measure how you're doing things that are good for you. So for example, he could suggest that you take a certain number of runs a week, or that you will stick to a particular diet. These kind of measurements are particularly difficult for companies to determine, but it allows them to prepare for the future and not to just look backwards. I also want to add one word of caution here. While it's great that the company identifies objectives in each of these spheres and makes sure that these things get measured accordingly on various different layers in the organization, there's a danger that they develop something that is too complex. Strategies have to remain simple. And if you have more than 3 overall objectives for your firm, the likelihood that you will achieve any of them is diminishing radically. So stick to something simple, straightforward, that can be communicated clearly across the organization, and then make sure that this simple strategy can be measured in terms of financials, customers, the processes that you have to run internally, and the learning and growth initiatives that you have to set in order for this to become a reality.